welcome. We're here in the Business Transformation Center healthcare space and got a special guest today. We're going to talk to Rick Bryant with Veritas. And why don't you give us a little bit of your background, Rick, and kind of tell us what you might want to talk about a little bit today.
Thanks for having me, Andy. I'm the healthcare CTO within Veritas. My claim to fame is I have been in healthcare for now 30 years as of September of this year. And I've been able to witness a lot of changes. And the thing that I really like with Veritas, we built a dedicated healthcare division where we are identifying solutions to real world problems in an industry that is under duress and trying to keep us all healthy and alive. So it gives me quite a bit of personal satisfaction to be working and helping with these folks.
So you actually brought up a really interesting point. One of the things that when I talk to partners that say, hey, I want to start selling in healthcare, I not exactly jokingly say, have you hired a doctor or a nurse yet? Because it's a very specialized field from the standpoint of, I usually talk about it from the standpoint of, you need to know the vocabulary. You need to understand that the words you're used to don't necessarily mean the same thing. So related to that, I guess what I would say is in a lot of cases, a healthcare provider might have their preferred IT person, but with some of the challenges that we've got right now, and I'm sure that's some of the stuff we're going to talk about, would there be kind of a broad recommendation that you would say if a partner wants to maybe not necessarily build a healthcare practice, but maybe they've got that Veritas expertise or expertise in another related IT area and wants to help out partners who have those deep medical relationships? What would be the thing that they would say, hey, I can do this for you that you may not have that skill set?
So I think it's a very good point. I tell people the same thing. Healthcare is not an industry that you just kind of stumble into. And if you do, you're not going to be very successful. You have to know the terminology and you have to know the business drivers, what's going on in the world, and some of which are on our front page news even to this day and have been for the entire pandemic. Those challenges affect patient care. And also you have to realize that in working with healthcare, patient care comes first. Before cost savings, before revenue, they take a Hippocratic oath to first do no harm and to help people. So as long as you can focus on those three areas, you can find great success in healthcare.
So if we had a partner, for example, who was deeply specialized in Veritas and wanted to work with other IT providers who may not necessarily have that background, especially around ransomware, those type of things, or I know Veritas has some great solutions, really kind of focusing on, hey, I'm not trying to take necessarily things away from you, but help you build a more robust practice that's going to create new opportunities.
Exactly. And at Veritas, when you do business with us, when you're one of our partners, we provide the expertise and the resources to go in with you as a team. In fact, especially for healthcare, I like to look at it very strategically, not just a specific solution, which might be the focus today, but how is it going to be supported over the next 3 to 5 years? And how is the industry going to change? And how is that technology going to adapt? So we'd love to work with you guys. We'd love to help you build your healthcare practices. I personally have helped build the healthcare practice with Sirius and CDW and several others. So we can help you along that journey.
So in fact, that if we had partners who might be interested in getting into the healthcare space and have that good Veritas relationship now, have that background in disaster recovery, business continuity, those sort of things, this might be a good inroad for them.
Absolutely. And you're coming in at a challenging time. I think when we start talking about the biggest drivers and the biggest news and the biggest impacts within healthcare, you're going to see where you're going to want to partner with a Veritas to make it cost effective.
So one of the biggest things that we typically hear about in the healthcare space is ransomware, just from the standpoint of the value of that information, whether you look at it from the standpoint of what that might be actually worth on some market out there, or just the potential threat from hey, I'm going to release this information. People are going to know that there was a breach and you're going to get fined unless you pay me.
Big time. Yeah, that's a serious threat. It's funny. I smile when you say ransomware because honestly, personally, I have been warning the industry, the healthcare industry, about ransomware risks since 2008. Way before it was such a pervasive problem. And it's not as though I'm a rocket scientist or a brain surgeon. It's just really easy to correlate high value data with low security budgets. Now the entire industry is being impacted by this, and there's a reason why it's being impacted by this. These bad guys know to attack industries when they're under duress. You're like 72% more likely just to pay to make it go away than to try to recover. And when you start talking about those type of solutions, we've built that in from our product literally from day one. For example, our purpose-built backup appliances were designed with a zero trust architecture. We've sold more of those into healthcare and the federal government than anybody else or any other industry, because once the data gets in there, it's protected from ransomware and even new zero-day vulnerabilities. What we've added on top of that is we have a unique to the industry ransomware solution that has a separate and protected immutability timer. If you look at the biggest nightmares that you see on the news, like scripts, for example, that impact not only caused a breach of 149,000 records, which is going to be fines associated with OCR, because part of ransomware actually exfiltrates the data. And in healthcare, if more than 50 records are compromised or have a moderate chance after doing a risk analysis that inappropriate persons has viewed it, anything more than 50 records has to be reported to OCR, and it has to be reported to all the customers. Our immutability timer cannot be tampered. Everybody has a ransomware solution, but almost every one of them require an NTP source to be that source of truth. If you hack the NTP source like they did in the scripts hack, then you show those immutable copies as expired and they can be deleted. 100% of our customers, knock on wood, have been recoverable, and we plan on keeping it that way.
So I'm gonna pick up on two things there. One of them is you kind of gave me a flashback to some of the local attorney radio ads that I've heard, where it's like, don't just mail in that ticket. And they talk about, hey, you gotta make sure, you gotta, because if you just mail it in, there might be other impacts that you're not thinking about. So in a lot of cases, just paying that ransom doesn't necessarily solve the problem. The other one that you mentioned is the whole idea that in some cases, even if you can't publicly find the records out there, you can get fined just because they felt you didn't do a good enough job of securing. And that's not something that we're used to in a lot of the other industries, because in a lot of cases, it's like, well, they tried to, but they didn't get it. I'm good. Doesn't necessarily work in healthcare.
Yeah, healthcare actually has 3 levels of granularity in terms of their risk, right? The worst possibly being is knowing neglect, knowing that you have a vulnerability and knowingly not addressing it. That's going to have much more stringent fines than trying to have or performing a best effort, either not knowing that there was a vulnerability and not reasonably should have known that there's a vulnerability, or having done as much as you possibly could to be able to protect that. Organizations in that space get lesser fines, if any fines at all, because they realize it's a hostile world out there. But we have to keep playing cat and mouse with these bad actors to be able to protect our environments. I'll tell you one thing. I've been called in front of the U.S. Army. I've been called in front of the new Cybersecurity Council, all to talk about ransomware. And what really hit me when they said that, we put sanctions on North Korea to stop the missile program, but it did absolutely no good because they were able to create $1.5 billion in revenue just from ransomware. And then it kind of dawned on me, this isn't something that just affects one industry. This affects literally our entire foreign policy. So just a little interesting tidbit that we picked up on that.
So we've talked about a few different things. I'm assuming that there isn't a Veritas single product that solves all your problems. So I'm expecting we're talking about a couple of different products used in combination really provide that highest level of security. But what would be our starting point if I were looking at a healthcare practice and they really don't have any kind of thing in place yet? Where would I start?
We've actually developed a practice around being able to work with this, because honestly, for the first time in 30 years, I've been trying to get the infrastructure teams and the security teams to work together cohesively to no avail. But with ransomware, it is important to bring the infrastructure teams and the security teams to work together. So obviously, the first step is to make sure that you have a good immutable copy of all of your data and that that immutable copy cannot be impacted. As part of our products, that we also have embedded malware scanning to be able to find a good last known good copy in case you backed up a 0-day. And it even includes orchestration, meaning that with the press of a button, it can recover your applications in the order that they need to be recovered, meaning bring up the database before you bring up the application, before you open up the client access. That's all embedded in the core product. We call it Veritas Resiliency Platform, and it's a very powerful tool because unlike others in the industry, we're no longer focused on data protection. I tell people I was a CIO for years, a CTO for years. Do you know how much I cared about data protection? Absolutely zero. It was like paying for insurance. You pay and pay and pay, and hopefully if it does rain and you have that accident, they'll pay you back. But if you talk to me about predictable resiliency, that is something I care about. And Veritas as a company is moving away from data protection to predictable resiliency, meaning not that we just have you backed up, but we can have you recovered within this time frame with this product portfolio, this time frame with the next, all the way up to the highest levels that the financial services and the stock market run on. The InfoScale technology is part of the portfolio that never goes down. But we also have technologies as part of the portfolio called netbackup IT analytics. And we've incorporated this as part of our cybersecurity strategy. And that with that product, it's constantly looking at all of your CPU, your network, and your storage IO. So we've been able to correlate when you see high CPU utilization or high storage IO, something's cranking that file, and most likely it's encrypting. Well, with that type of real-time alerting, we can send an alert to a SIM and be able to get early containment and to be able to minimize that infection, to be able to work with those groups. Something that also differentiates my practice in healthcare from others is that I take a comprehensive approach, meaning having been CISO for years, I will recommend the perimeter security that they need, like sandboxing and proxies and all those things, even though I don't sell them, because ultimately it's my job to keep these customers protected. And it's also great for the partner community because not only do they make a ton of money on the services, every dollar that we spend on a technology solution is usually matched by $1 worth of services, but they can also sell a ton of other security aspects that need to be done as part of a comprehensive program.
So no, that's great advice for our partners. And that's one of the things that we talk about is there's always something else on the table. And one of the things I look at is just because of my experience in the field is if there's a problem, it's almost never your stuff. It's something else going on in the environment that you're not aware of. So it really pays you both from the opportunity standpoint and the risk management standpoint to really have a good overall picture of what's really going on. So if something happens, you're aware of it and you know how that might interact with something else that you're doing.
Exactly. And that's the type of value that we can add. And I think that's a good takeaway for the healthcare industry in general. Don't sell them technology, sell them solutions to their problem. And another trend that's happening, and this is not a good trend, but as you remember, during the pandemic, we shut down a lot of discretionary services. That caused huge revenue impacts on the healthcare industry. In addition to that, they're seeing about a 20% reduction in revenue even after everything's been opened back up. And part of that is because we saw so many telehealth only shops open up under the Stafford Act that's cannibalizing the business. The takeaway from this is to be successful to sell into healthcare, you need to have a good return on investment. And that should be business 101 for everybody. But with a lot of our tools, like the NetBackup IT Analytics, we reduce total storage and total CPU spend by about 20%. Now, whether you want to use that to extend your life cycle out and postpone new storage and new compute purposes, or if you want to cut it to the bottom line, that's up to you. A lot of our customers like to reduce the cost of IT so they can focus on patient-facing applications. Another component is with our products, our cloud scale and the Alta products, as we've relabeled it, we are able to reduce the expense of leveraging the public cloud by as much as 60 to 90%. And that's one of those things where we're starting to see rapid adoption of the cloud, mostly because of supply chain and agility, where it used to take 2 weeks to buy a server and to get it shipped. Now it's taken a month or two to even get the server, and then you provision and everything. Well, that's not meeting the needs of the industry or the surge capacity. So we saw the most rapid adoption of public cloud over the past 3 years than I have in the past 10. Also, the most rapid adoption of telehealth that we've been pushing for over 10 years as well. So make a business case for them and show them where they're going to reduce spend over here by spending a little bit over here and putting money back on the bottom line. That's just a winning combination.
So one of the things we like to ask when we have these interviews is like, what's your favorite feature? What's your favorite product? I'm going to guess, because you've said NetBackup IT analytics twice already. Can you go for the hat trick and give us a third reason why partners should be talking about NetBackup IT analytics?
All right, you got me. I never really, honestly, it was called aptare before we called it NetBackup Analytics, and I liked it better as aptare because with the naming of NetBackup IT Analytics, it makes you think that it's only IT analytics for NetBackup, when in reality it is IT analytics across your board. And it has three huge value propositions. The first is being able to reduce over provision, storage, compute, like we already talked about. The second is that it'll look at your environment and make sure that you are protecting all of your data. In healthcare, that's critical because we are required under HIPAA by law since 1996 to back up all patient care and PHI. The third, which is really awesome, is that it's able to look at your applications and you can put in your cloud cost for this cloud or that cloud, and it'll tell you a predictable cost model for it. And in healthcare, let me tell you, it's not easy to move stuff to the cloud. We were working with Tufts Medicine. They were the first ever all public cloud implementation of Epic. And what they found was they couldn't just move the EMR. They had to move 38 other applications that had to be adjacent. So the first move was 39 applications. Flash forward to today, they're getting better performance than they were even on-prem, and they're at over 160 different types of applications. So NetBackup IT Analytics gives you real-time cost savings, it gives you risk mitigation, and it'll help you adopt and embrace the cloud. But I never really thought about what my favorite product. I don't really have a favorite product. That's like saying, which is your favorite kid?
It depends on who took out the trash last.
Yeah.
So got one last question for you here. Obviously, if it wasn't obvious, healthcare is a highly regulated industry. I have a lot of background in data center storage, and you're talking about moving to cloud. And in addition to all of the regulatory stuff, compliance and compliant data, one of the things that I just kind of throw out there as a hook for people to get them thinking is that if you've got data over 5 years old, you've got non-compliant data. Just because a lot of these rules weren't even in place that many years ago, and maybe it's 7 years in healthcare because they were kind of on the forefront of a lot of these regulations. But back to your point about knowing vulnerability versus we did the best we could. I talk about that compliance issue the same way. If I've got data on a static system in my data center and it's non-compliant and it's sitting there because I've got some kind of regulatory timeout, I've got to hold it for a while, that's one thing. If I actively move it to new storage or move it to the cloud, now I'm in this case of potentially actively preserving non-compliant data. Is that really an issue? And what kind of options do we have around that?
Healthcare is one of the most difficult industries to work with when it comes to defensible deletion. And, I'm guilty of this too. I honestly still have PowerPoint presentations from MD Anderson, and I haven't worked there for over 25 years. And this is what we always say, if I delete the data, it could hold the cure for cancer. We all know in reality that's not. It's probably 75. In fact, I did an assessment at Texas Children's. 70 to 80% of the data that we had on our storage arrays hadn't been touched in over 5 years. And specific to your question around healthcare, HIMSS released some data. It's a little old now, maybe 2 or 3 years old. And they said to properly secure PHI per the regulation, per HIPAA, it costs about $8 a record. And if you don't know where all your PHI is, does that mean you're spending $8 to protect every record, therefore overspending tremendously and increasing the cost of healthcare? Or more than likely, you have that data that's non-compliant. So getting visibility of that data is paramount to being able to protect it and to be able to recover it.
All right. Thank you very much for your time today, Rick.
It's been a blast. You take care, Andrew.